Hi everyone! So this topic has been on my mind for a long time, and it's time to finally put this jumbled mess of thoughts into words. Last year, I went to a housewarming party, and I found myself in a group conversation about anti-vaxxers. We were all in agreement about vaccines, but then someone posed the question, can you still be friends with someone who's anti-vax? Ironically, this is where I began to diverge from the group. To me, this question was absurd, like, of course? But the others were agnostic or answered no. Their reasoning was that anti-vaxxers are selfish and putting others at risk, and that crossed a line for them. In stereotypical vegan fashion, I brought up veganism, and asked how they felt about vegans who refused to be friends with non-vegans. Of course they thought this was unreasonable, as none of them were vegan. I want to dig into this concept of political disagreement and tolerance. I'm sure most of y'all have seen this post in one form or another. It says, we can disagree and still be friends. Yes, bitch, about pizza toppings, not racism. The sentiment is that we can disagree on inconsequential shit, but not consequential stuff like human rights. Swap pizza toppings with movies or music, and racism with trans rights or abortion rights. As with a lot of memes, it's a bit overly simplistic. My feelings kinda depend on what I've been primed with that week. Catch me in a certain mood, and I agree, but catch me in a different mood, and I'm writing an entire video essay on the nuances. Ultimately, it depends on how we're defining friendship, and how extreme their views are. Freshman year of college, before I made new friends, I primarily hung out with my Christian friend from high school, and her friend group from church. I experienced what I call the Bible roadblock, which is where you can't really have deep conversations because there's this massive clash in worldviews, and you get stuck at that place. We grew apart because we couldn't really build a deep connection. That's not to say that I don't consider them friends. I still do, but I'm defining friend more loosely here. And the feeling is mutual. All of their closest friends are Christian. I met my best friend that same year in our campus animal rights club. She and I are both vegan, atheist, and leftist. Our close connection was built on these values. Same is true for my husband. If either one of them were to stop being vegan or convert to Christianity, that would impact our relationship. This doesn't mean I'm intolerant of Christians or non-vegans. It means that I reserve best friend and husband status for people who share my worldview. I know plenty of people who have quit being vegan or became conservative, who I haven't excised from my life entirely, because our relationship wasn't built on these particular values. It was built on something else, like proximity, blood relations, or some other shared interest. Just as there are degrees of friendship, there are degrees of respect. When non-vegans say things like, I respect your choice to be vegan, you should respect my choice to eat meat, they're missing the point that one choice is respectable while the other is not. Political views such as, marriage is between a man and a woman, do not deserve respect. A person holding such beliefs may deserve respect for good they've done in other areas, or they may deserve basic respect as a human being, but not beyond that. Everyone deserves a basic level of respect, but higher levels of respect are earned. There are also degrees of political difference. Remember that picture that went viral a few years ago of Ellen DeGeneres hanging out with George Bush at a baseball game? Some people say this photo restored their faith in humanity because it proved that it is possible to set aside political differences. Other people were outraged that Ellen would call a war criminal a friend. I definitely fall into the latter camp. Committing war crimes crosses a line. Going back to the meme about pizza toppings versus racism, it depends on the extent of their racism. Disagreeing on what is considered cultural appropriation is not the same as disagreeing on interracial marriage. We can disagree and still be friends if your views fall within the Overton window. And it's okay to have a narrower window for close friendships. As society progresses on certain issues, the Overton window shifts. Views that were once deemed moderate are now deemed extreme. We don't want to cut ties with everyone who has views that are deemed moderate by the mainstream, even if we are confident that they will one day be viewed as extreme, because doing so is not an effective way to change minds. However, once we have won over the mainstream, it makes sense to change our approach and change what we're willing to tolerate. Because holding on to an oppressive belief against the mainstream says a lot more about someone's character than holding an oppressive belief because it's a social norm. My best friend and I were discussing this, and what it came down to was, how far out of the way are they going to spread harmful views? For example, she chose to invite her conservative Christian grandpa to her wedding, but he's not going out of his way to spread hate towards gay people. If he were a politician or preacher, she might have thought twice about inviting him. It's one thing to hold the view that God created marriage between a man and a woman, but being in a position of power and using that power to strip away other people's rights to marry who they love adds another layer to it. The same rule applies to parasocial relationships. How dedicated are they to spreading harmful views? I try to look at their content as a whole. What is their general message? Is it positive or negative? I've been trying to piece together what it is that tips the scales for me, because it isn't any one specific view. It isn't abortion rights or trans rights or animal rights, even though these are things I feel strongly about. It's persistent intellectual dishonesty that makes me lose respect and unsubscribe. Everyone can be stubborn from time to time, but if you're constantly doing mental gymnastics and standing firmly and arrogantly in your wrongness, despite being presented with lots of compelling arguments and evidence to the contrary, across multiple subjects, you've lost me. I don't have perfect judgment though. We're all influenced by personal biases and emotional reasoning. It's easier for me to forgive a specific take if it's coming from someone who has made a huge positive impact on my life, versus someone I recently stumbled across online. It's also easier to forgive someone I have a personal relationship with than someone I don't. Holding right-wing beliefs is not the same as making a career out of bigotry. Like, it's one thing if someone casually watches the Daily Wire, but it's another thing if they decide to go work for the Daily Wire. I can give the casual viewer the benefit of the doubt, like they're just misinformed. They don't have time in their busy lives to properly inform themselves on all of these issues. But if you are stepping onto a platform with the intent to spread a message, you're taking on greater responsibility to make sure the stuff you're saying is accurate. I have very little respect for people like Matt Walsh, for example. Next, I want to talk about the paradox of tolerance. Tolerance is generally a good thing to have, but too much tolerance leads to very dangerous outcomes, as illustrated by this graphic. There is a categorical difference between a trans person demanding respect for their gender identity and a conservative demanding respect for their transphobic beliefs. Despite accusations of hypocrisy from the right, there's nothing hypocritical about being intolerant of intolerance. The problem is when we fail to separate people from their beliefs and become intolerant of their human existence. Generally speaking, the left has more legitimate reasons to be intolerant of right-wingers than vice versa. But just because something is more understandable doesn't make it right. Like, a person of color's prejudice towards white people is more understandable than a white person's prejudice towards people of color. But that doesn't justify actual anti-white racism. I think the left can stand to be more tolerant. Having spent a lot of time in progressive spaces, I can say from experience that these environments can feel quite intimidating. Disagreeing on something minor is treated as a major offense. Obviously, not all leftists are hostile to disagreement, so I don't want to characterize this as a problem unique to the left, but it certainly exists on the left. I just want to ask the people who participate in cancel culture, do you actually feel safe to express yourself? Or are you participating out of fear? Factionalization is a natural human tendency, but continuing to factionalize and factionalize and factionalize is futile, because no group is ever going to reach a consensus on everything. We all see the world through a unique lens, as we all come from different backgrounds. No two people share the exact same experiences. We have to be okay with a certain amount of disagreement. But of course there are limits to tolerance. I can tolerate you as a person. I can tolerate your presence in my life. But I can't tolerate your oppressive beliefs or actions. Some people take others' intolerance of their beliefs or actions personally. If I express my views on a particular subject, they take it to mean that I'm intolerant of them. The people in my life who I disagree with are in my life because they recognize that my views on a certain topic do not reflect my view of them overall. And that's the key takeaway from this video. We have to be able to separate people from their beliefs. Healthy disagreement requires both parties not taking things personally. The left cringes at the slogan, "Hate the sin, not the sinner," and understandably so, given the context it's often used in. It's hurtful to imply that homosexuality is sinful and wrong, because it's not. It's literally just love. But I still appreciate the sentiment behind this slogan. We can hate meat eating without hating meat eaters. We can hate landlording without hating landlords. I believe many Christians are being genuine when they say they hate the sin, not the sinner. My issue is with their epistemology. There is no rational basis for their belief that homosexuality is wrong. That's where the focus of our criticism should be. Rather than attacking their character, we should attack their epistemology, point out the flaws in the methods they use to arrive at their conclusions, and of course, point out the real-world harm that is caused by their beliefs. Clementine Morrigan, a leftist writer who speaks out against cancel culture, made a point on her podcast that if we are asking people to be tolerant of us, we have to extend tolerance to them. It's the same advice given in couples therapy. If you want your partner to change their behavior, you have to emulate that behavior. That doesn't mean we have to tolerate the harmful behavior itself. It just means that we should demonstrate a willingness to set aside differences in certain settings in the interest of solidarity. Clementine argues that not only is banning people from community wrong in principle, it is not an effective way to get the outcome we want. She points out the hypocrisy of advocating for prison abolition while participating in cancel culture. You're gonna ban someone from community events for some minor offense like an insensitive tweet, yet stand in solidarity with people who literally committed violent crimes? Leftist organizations often have zero-tolerance policies for things like racism or sexism, yet advocate for the abolition of prisons on the basis that we should focus on rehabilitation, not punishment. Do you think banning people from community events isn't punishment? What kind of people do you think are locked up in prisons? Intersectional feminists? You have all this compassion for prisoners you don't know, yet seemingly no compassion for members of your community who don't have all the right ideas. Personally, I'm agnostic about prison abolition, so I'm not sure I agree with Clementine that banning people from events is wrong in principle. I think it depends on what they did. But I do agree with her general point. In conclusion, I think we should follow the golden rule here. I don't like walking on eggshells, so I don't want other people to feel that they have to walk on eggshells around me. I like being given the benefit of the doubt, so I should give others the benefit of the doubt. And as the wonderful vegan gays put it, I don't even agree with myself half the time, so why should I expect others to agree with me all the time? Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up and let me know what you think. Alright, peace out.
Yo, how when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them say me no eat no fish, nah, no meat now. How when me eat them, I wonder when me yam. When me tell them say that I'm a vegan man. How when me eat them, I wonder when me eat.